Welcome back to Interjections. It's going to be a Subito episode this time. I'm your host Mikko, and with me, I'm going to welcome back our member who were part of this, maybe one of the most memorable Inter matches of all time, straight from Milano. Irfan, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. You're so right. It was, I know there's some chatter in the media about how this is probably one of the best, Champions League ties, Champions League matches ever, and it definitely felt that way being in the stadium. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about it, and then also talk about what happened just recently with our latest win and with Napoli slipping up a little bit. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we can talk about the Torino match and the Serie A a bit later, but first, let's go back to last Tuesday and this epic 4-3 match against Barcelona. You were there. How was it? How was it on the scene of the crime?
Something I'll never forget. It's honestly undescribable. The atmosphere in the San Siro was just incredible. A few kind of housekeeping things first. They're so well organized. Like we got to the stadium. We actually ended up being a little later. We were planning to get to the stadium almost 2 hours before. We got there about an hour before, but between the lines and the security and checking tickets and getting inside, we were basically in our seats 20 minutes after arriving, which was pretty crazy, well before the match was going to start. So that was really nice. So props to the San Siro staff and everything for being very organized and ready. It wasn't much of a disaster getting into the stadium. But the stadium was it was crazy. Everybody was on their feet. Everybody was so into it. And, if you go for a regular Serie A match, it's a very similar situation there too. Like the passion and excitement of the fans you can feel. But this was that and more. You can tell it was obviously packed out. People were really, really into it, really intense, cheering the club on immensely. Every song and chant and every bit of choreo was just really exciting. And it was the tension in the stadium was the only thing that rivaled the excitement, because you can tell that the fans were very anxious, even before a kick, occurred. And then once the match started, it was just intense, because what a start. I mean, you have Barcelona starting off, you have all the star power on their team, and then, it's Inter who go and grab the first goal through some great, built up play, and you dispossess Barcelona, and then you attack pretty quickly and you get a goal, and it's Lautaro who scored. So that was incredible. And then you score again, and then it's 2-0, and the atmosphere in the stadium at that point was just crazy. It was something that, again, I'll always remember, because the excitement and, the fans jumping up and down and screaming and really getting into it was like nothing I've ever seen before at any sporting event I've ever been to ever. So that was incredible. And then you get to halftime, and you could tell some of the nerves start to set in, even before the second half whistle. You can tell everyone's like, all right, we're up 2-0. We've seen this story before with Barcelona, but also with other teams in Serie A. Like this propensity for Inter to kind of sit back and let a little bit too much occur in front of them and get behind them. And so there was a lot of tension at that point in the stadium. And then second half starts, and then obviously you have this wave after wave of Barcelona attack. And, the first goal occurs, and, there's a little bit of a deflation in the stadium. You can tell people are trying to get a little bit nervous, but everyone's still fairly optimistic at that point. And then, one thing that I mentioned to you before, I mentioned to others, when you're watching this on TV, you get like this very keen sense of, Summer making these incredible saves and things like that. Some of the saves that he made on Yamal, when Yamal would cut in and unleash a shot on his left foot, when you're in the stadium, it's almost more difficult to appreciate the save than it is when you're on TV, because when you're on TV, when you're watching on TV, they show you the replay, they show you the slow motion, they show you over and over again the different angles. So depending on where you're on the stadium, the save looks incredible, but you don't truly appreciate just how epic it is in that moment.
Because you don't see it like from different angles. You don't see the kind of how it really was. If you like you see it once and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you'll see it in real time. You won't see it in slow motion, and you don't know it's happening, right? So while you're in the stadium, you can't observe some of the little kind of beautiful things that occur where as soon as Yamal cuts in on his left, you see Summer start to cheat a little bit in that direction. And then he takes like one big step and then jumps. So, it's being in the stadium is incredible from an experience standpoint, but from a watching the kind of intricacies of the match standpoint, it's some of it's lost because you don't have the benefit of the slow motion and the additional replays. But it was incredible. One thing I want to mention specifically though is, as good as all of those other saves were, there was a moment when we were up 2-1 and Barcelona ended up having a kind of a breakaway, right? They took a ball. I think it was off of a failed corner by us. They took the ball and then they started going the other way. And I think it was literally 3-on-1 or 3-on-2. And it was you could tell in the stadium because it was already 2-1 at that point. Everyone was so nervous when that play was happening. And then I forgot who it was, but I think it might have been Rafinha or someone squared the ball over to like Garcia, and Garcia had the entire net wide open, and he took the shot. And I think he literally it could have been a much better shot if you think about it in terms of placement. But when you watch it, he didn't need to spend too much time placing it because literally the entire net was open. And then you saw Summer kind of scramble across and then dive and stop the shot. That's when the stadium, in my opinion, was the loudest up to that point. It was incredible. Like, and in all the Summer saves, and I think partly because I said you can't anticipate when a save is about to happen, so you sometimes don't truly appreciate the intricacies of it. This was different because it was after such a long buildup where it was obvious that Barcelona was going to get a really good chance. And so the stadium erupted at that point, and it was the most exciting, thing I had witnessed up to that point. In the match.
I remember very, very well that moment, because when you follow it, even from a TV screen, you are like watching it. Oh fuck! Now they're gonna get the equalizer, and then the save happens. Yeah, that was amazing. But then they equalized 3 minutes after.
Yeah, I know. So that save, it was epic, and that elicited the kind of response in the stadium that I don't think any other save did. Even though some of the other saves were, equally, if not more impressive. But that was something else. It honestly felt like a hockey save. Like, one of those saves where like the goalie in hockey is like tracking one direction, and then all of a sudden the puck gets squared and then he just dives across the net hoping. But I mean, this is football, right? I mean, the nets are so much bigger. So for him to pull off that save was incredible. And then, then like you said, they scored 3 minutes later, and then everything just kind of got deflated in the stadium. There were some accounts I read where they were saying, "Oh, everything was very quiet." It still wasn't quiet. I think people still realized that there was a draw on the table, and we were still very much in it. I think where a lot of people started to lose some of the hope, and a lot of people were starting to get a little bit despondent, was when they started seeing some of the subs being made, because he took off Lautaro, and everyone could tell watching him that Lautaro was not nearly at 100%.
Yeah.
And then honestly, neither was Thuram. And, the team, you could tell soon after the second half that they were really, really tired. Like they were really bogged down. They weren't feeling great. And then when you take off Lautaro, then and you find yourself in a situation where you essentially need a goal or you're going to penalties, that's when I think a lot of people were a little bit more deflated. And then sure enough, Barcelona have another kind of build up and, they ended up scoring off of the rebound with Rafinha to make it 3-2. And at that point, I think, because it was so late in the match, it was probably 87th, 88th minute.
Yeah,
at that point, everyone was like, at that point, everyone was like, oh, this is kind of inevitable. But even then, Mikko, I'll tell you, like the stadium was still pretty rocking. I mean, like, I know there's some stories about how like a bunch of fans left at that point and then they couldn't get back in. And that's funny and stuff like that. But honestly, like you could probably count on your hands the amount of people who did that. Most people stayed because by then I think the stadium you could probably sense it on TV too, but the stadium had this feeling of like, honestly, just respect for the players after what they had witnessed, because you can tell on the pitch how hard everybody was working, how emotional it was for everybody. And then all of the forced substitutions because of injuries and because of just fatigue, like DeMarco coming off was emotional, I think, for a lot of people because he's, Inter's sort of native son and a lot of fans really like him. And you could tell Barella was gassed by that point. You could tell Mkhitaryan was on his last legs. Everything was just, I think there was a tremendous amount of respect for the performance of Inter, even if they were going to lose 3-2 at that point. And you probably felt that watching it on the TV as well. I think Inter fans just generally felt that way.
Yeah, and I remember, well, we discussed about the match in previous episode already, but that was so close to the match that I like tried to process the the whole experience afterwards. And yeah, at that point, I felt that, God damn it, this was kind of gonna happen anyway. Kind of emotion at that point, and I don't know. It didn't felt as bad as you could imagine, kind of at that point, because the team had fought so well. But then was there like a? You said that the stadium was still rocking. Was it like was it like a full party still till the end? No. When Acerbi ended up scoring, or how was the mood there?
You could tell that after the Rafinha goal, the stadium was still active, but you could tell it was more deflated, and I think people were accepting the inevitable. But I think a lot of fans were still showing a lot of respect to the team because of like what we were discussing, that you could tell that the effort was at 150% by everybody. The other thing that before I get to the Acerbi goal, the other thing I find really interesting is, you've been to matches multiple times. One of the things that I think you can't see as well, or maybe I just don't notice it because of, in this situation, just how much emotion was everywhere in the stadium. One thing you don't appreciate when you're in the stadium is how some of like the little mistakes end up costing us like goals or costing us chances. So, on the second and the third goal for Barcelona, they were directly a result of like mistakes by Inter giving the ball away essentially under pressure, not right near our box. I got to tell you, like when you're in the stadium, you don't either remember or you don't feel it as much as when you're watching it on TV. When you're watching it on TV and a player gives the ball away, you're like, oh my God, and then you're like analyzing, like the goal came directly from there and this and that, and how could he do that? And then you get mad at the player. It's weird watching it in the stadium. I think it's so hard to isolate. Again, I think maybe because of the replays and because of like the different views, like it's so hard to isolate the mistake. It's almost like the goal happens and you're just overcome with emotion versus like trying to rediscover what had happened to lead up to the goal. And so that was another kind of interesting kind of feature, I think, of watching live versus watching it on the TV.
Yeah. Well, obviously because you lived the moment so intensely
Yeah.
there that it's impossible to kind of remember what happened 5 seconds ago, almost.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah,
so then the stadium's a little bit more quiet, more subdued, but still pretty respectful. And then just out of nowhere, because before the Acerbi goal, Barcelona basically had another sort of breakaway chance, and they ended up hitting the post. And so at that point, everyone's just like, oh my gosh, like, they're more likely to score another goal than we are, especially when you knew what we had out there on the pitch, like in terms of all the substitutions we had to make. And so
yeah.
when the Acerbi goal happens, it's just absolutely like bonkers. It almost felt, honestly, like it took the stadium like a few seconds to realize what had actually happened, because it was just so unexpected, and it was just so crazy to expect that something like that would happen. And then the way it happened, right? Because the long ball comes in, and Turam gets it, and you're like, okay, well, okay, this is kind of exciting, because we actually seem like we're either even on numbers, or we even have an advantage so far up the field. That's kind of crazy, but you still don't anticipate that you're going to end up scoring there. And so Thuram takes the ball and he lays it off to Dumfries, and you're like, all right, now we've got something happening. But then there's that little collision, or there's that collision that happens before. And then when Dumfries gets the ball and he squares it, it's so fast. Like the ball comes in at such high speed, and then you see Acerbi running, and you see the goal happen, and almost like it takes you like a second to process what just happened. And as soon as that was processed, the stadium erupted. Like I would have loved to see like a sound machine or like a sound measure of how loud it was in the stadium at that point. But it was just crazy. It was intense, and I remember jumping up and down and being so excited and just like losing my mind, And I was there with my son and my best friend and his son. And I remember talking to my son after the match, and he was saying, I was like, "Oh, what did you think of the match?" Because he's kind of like an early football fan. He's into it, but he's not crazy obsessed with it yet. And he was telling me like the one thing he'll always remember, it was more than what happened on the pitch, was my reaction to what happened. He's like, the way you were excited and jumping up and down, he's like, I've never seen that. That was just unbelievable. And I was like, yeah. So that, not only did that Acerbi goal, result in the stadium going crazy, giving us probably one of the greatest endings, or the start of an ending that we could imagine against one of the world's most famous and best teams, it also created essentially what's a core memory for me and my son. So I'll always remember that and be thankful for Acerbi and everybody else who kind of made that goal happen.
Wow, that's like so so beautiful to hear,
Yeah.
hear that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I watched that Acerbi go like 100 times from different like social media channels, and I keep coming back to that moment, and I rewatch all those goals, and especially the latest goals. There are so many videos going everywhere, and
Yeah.
that they make all different kind of videos with funny or cool background music and stuff.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. And I
it's
think
really like
it's crazy.
yeah
Yeah.
it's
No,
like it's really like exploding in the social media as well, this
it
whole thing.
is. It is. And honestly, Mikko, the one thing that is almost tangible, right? It's almost like something you could feel. It's just how much tension there is, like, how much emotion there was, not only on the field, but also just in the stands. Like there was just, I can't explain to you just how like palpable it was. Like you could just reach out and feel the emotion, and and it was coming from the pitch, like the fans, at San Siro, they always bring the intensity, they always bring the atmosphere, but this level of emotion and just commitment coming from the players was just something different in this match, honestly. And when you see, I think you guys mentioned this in the last episode, which was, you couldn't even write a script. If you were imagining a script, you asked ChatGPT to write you an emotional, dramatic script about how this game would would elapse, you probably wouldn't have imagined that, a 37-year-old center back on his wrong foot ends up making like a striker style run with a top bin forward finish in the 93rd minute to level the score. And this is somebody who's never, or this was his first goal, I think, in Europe, and his first goal of the season. And, for him to do that with all the stuff that had gone on in his life, I think it was incredible. Like, one of the things I really liked about your guys' last episode, I think you guys all talked about it, and Jay mentioned it specifically, which was, very much the perception of this match was you have these young, well-fed, taken care of guys who are just prodigious talents, right? Like, it's so easy for them. It's like the talent is oozing out of this Barcelona team, right? Like, they can't contain it. Like, we saw it in the Clásico this weekend, right? Like, it's just so easy for them to like get up and score and create and just attack. Like, I haven't seen a potent attack like Barcelona's in decades, really, like as good as they are. And it was that just, like immense innate talent of young, athletic, players, fast and, energetic, versus this like seasoned, hard knock sort of team of Inter. And that's exactly how it felt on the pitch. That's exactly how it felt in the stadium. And so then you're going into this extra time. And, people don't know what to expect at that point. And, the stadium, I think, was very excited that we had just gotten the winner. But then this like feeling of like, okay, now what do we do? Now we got 30 minutes and we don't have a lot of people, available, able to score on the pitch, like, where's this goal going to come from if we get a goal? And then, you'd already seen Summer make incredible saves. You had seen Barcelona hit the post, and you're like, all right, well, we got 30 extra minutes, but who knows what this looks like? And then, you'd pulled Hakan at that point, I think. So like, you're worried about penalties too, if it ended up getting there. And so you're like, all right, wondering what's going to happen. And then, the extra time went pretty different. I mean, I think we settled in pretty well. And then the goal by Frattesi was incredible, because I'll tell you, like, I was, if the stadium, so if you could see what Frattesi was seeing. So if you were in Frattesi's point of view, where he kind of cuts in and then he hesitates for a second, and then he lets the shot go into like the bottom corner of the net, we were basically sitting right behind him, right? So it was almost like whatever he was watching, or whatever his point of view was of the goal and the goalie, that was our similar view. So when he cut in, we were like, oh, okay, he's got a little bit of an angle for a shot, and then he hesitates. And then he unleashes a shot. And I swear, for me, that felt almost like slow motion, because I could see that same window open up because I was sitting right behind him. And when the ball was flying in there and kind of curving over the defender, it was awesome. And when he scored that goal, that's the one where I could remember it happening real time. And I knew immediately what was possibly going to happen and then what ended up happening. And then the celebration was just like nothing else. Like, I got to hand it to Frattesi. Like, as hard as I've been on him, this whole season, and in a lot of cases, rightfully so, the way he celebrated that goal, I think really just took the stadium to a different level. I mean, everyone knew the context of what was happening and how we had just gone up 4-3 against Barcelona in extra time. But the way he celebrated with the crowd, it was just, it was like nothing else. And he loves to do that. Like, that's his kind of style of doing it.
Yeah, he likes to score those important goals and then ends up celebrating like this primal animal.
Yes.
And if he doesn't want to stay at Inter, he isn't showing it when he's celebrating, because he is he is really into it. And,
yes, he really is. It was incredible. I mean, you could tell, well, like when Acerbi scored, it was, emotional, and it was, he was beside himself, and he was like, you could tell how important the goal was, and he the teammates all like, came to him immediately and were super supportive and excited and going crazy about that. And some of them would turn to the crowd and start cheering on the crowd. But man, when Fratesi scored, it was just a different level because he went straight to the crowd. Like he just wanted to revel in it with the San Siro crowd, and all the other players came and essentially joined him doing that. And that led for just a different kind of level of excitement. And so, it was amazing. It was something obviously I'll never forget. I mean, even any Inter fan watching anywhere in the world will never forget, but being in the stadium was truly special. And one of the things that was most kind of amazing for me was right when that final whistle blew, like the level of emotion again from the players and on the pitch was just something different. You see Bastoni fall to the ground in tears. You see Barella crying, and you see Summer just collapse on the pitch, just in emotion. And then seeing some of the players run to Summer and just try to like pick him up and like literally like pick him up off the floor. And he's so overcome with emotion and probably fatigue that he can't even get up for a few minutes. And then as soon as he does get up, you see like Pavard sort of pushing him towards the crowd because the crowd was just going nuts for Summer specifically. And he was just too overcome to even face the crowd and run after the crowd. And obviously all of that settled in after, 5 or 10 minutes. And then you saw Thuram go over to Yamal and put like his arm around his shoulder. And just, a bunch of our players were supporting the Barcelona players who were overcome with emotion because we obviously know what it's like to lose, especially in the final itself. So it was just something. It was something else to watch all of the players on the pitch right after the final whistle blew. But overall, man, I was joking. I was like, we got our money's worth because it was so worth it. And honestly, even if we would have lost 3-2 at the end of the day, it still would have been a unforgettable experience. But to have us go through and win in the way in which we won, it was just truly epic.
One last question. So when Fratesi scored, it was like was it like 99th minute or something?
Yeah, 99th minute.
So there was like 20 minutes left. What was the experience? Because I remember I was in Bayern match, and we got to experience with a couple of the friends.
Yeah,
we got to experience this last moments when you hope that we don't concede anymore, and the opponent is just like piling on pressure. How was the last? Because that was 20 minutes. That's a long time at Barcelona.
Oh, yeah. It was a long time, and you knew they were coming, and you knew they had all their good players and best players still on the pitch. It was very tense. It was extremely, extremely tense. Like everyone was so nervous, and people were still very happy. They were still cheering, but you could tell that like the nerves were there because again, in this tie, we've consistently given up leads, and it's kind of been the story of this tie. And with Barcelona's potent attack, like you knew it was, possibly going to happen again. So it was tense. The time seemed to move so slow. It was unbelievable. I remember turning to my son at one point and being like, I can't believe only 1 minute has passed, because by that time we were at like the 117th minute. And I was like, all right, this is done at this point, but no, time was it was so slow. It was so slow. And everything started to feel like it was in slow motion. And, Barcelona still had a couple of really, really good chances after Fratesi's goal scoring, including, the save that everyone talks about from Summer on Yamal
shot. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was very tense. And at that point, like, I don't know if you felt the same way with Bayern, but at that point, one of the things that you really remember that's etched into your mind is all of the players who during that period were just playing out of their minds, or like who did the little things to really help the team. And that's why it was so funny, because like that Summer save took on a whole new meaning, right? But that you had players like Taremi who just who dispossessed Yamal, and you're like, oh my gosh, like everyone was just so excited that for once,
stadium celebrating since
Yeah,
Taremi was able to get his feet on the ball.
exactly.
But
Because
yeah,
you're sitting there and you're like, man, we need everything at this point. Like whatever can happen should happen. And like when someone like Taremi basically shuts down Yamal like twice, and up to that point he had been taking on 2 or 3 defenders without problem really. And so whenever something like that would happen, or when someone would boot the ball down the pitch, you're just so excited. You're like, oh my gosh, yes, and then in all this time, you still have one eye on the sideline, and you have Inzaghi just going crazy over there, like just riling everybody up and getting the bench to move closer, and then yelling at the ref and like being in his animated way. So it was like a mixture of like excitement and just nervousness. It was again incredible.
yeah, it's actually on the stadium. It's actually very funny to follow Inzaghi a bit because he's very lively there. He isn't like he isn't that cool Ancelotti type of guy. He's totally different.
He is very different. And the other thing I think that's really cool is, obviously when Frattesi scores and he gets the entire crowd into it, you could tell. But there's so many times, I'm sure you saw it in the Bayern match, where different players would kind of turn to the crowd or acknowledge the crowd or like tell them to like get up and get excited. And every time a player would do that, like on our side, Bastoni did that a few times, and DeMarco did it too. And it's just a different level because you feel like they're acknowledging like you're there, and then they're telling you to like get excited and get up, and you're like, whoa, this is really cool. And so, not that you need that, but when you get that, you're just like, man, this is it's like extra special when players do that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe that's enough of Barcelona match. It really, really deserves like 2 episodes or 1.5 episodes of talk for certain. But let's move on to the Torino match. How did you like that match? What was your initial reactions before the match?
Before the match, my reaction was,
the match.
Yeah, I was like, I don't care about this match at all anymore. I was like, you look at the standings, and after that emotional high of beating Barcelona, you look at the standings, you're like, okay, we're playing Torino. I could really care less at this point. There's 3 matches left. Napoli is doing the Conte execution perfectly. And even if we win out, which, given the rotation and the injuries, it's going to be hard for us to do that in the first place. But even if we win out, you really expect Napoli to, lose a match or to like draw 2 matches. It's just so unlikely. And so I was pretty muted going into this match. I mean, also because you just can't get more emotionally high than you did during and after the Barcelona match. So I had very low expectations going into this match, especially when I saw the lineup as well. So I was watching it, but I was watching it kind of like, very reluctantly, like, okay, we'll see what happens. A very like nonchalant sort of attitude, not emotionally invested much in it at all. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Very, very kind of little hope that anything would really happen in the Scudetto race. So it was kind of like you said, but it's always, for me, it's interesting to follow the team when there are the kind of the bench guys playing. Like how can they like keep it up with themselves? Of course, there was there wasn't Barella. Barella wasn't starting, so they were like really the midfield was really the bench boys there, like totally bench boys. Zalewski in the Meazza role, like a totally new role for him, at least in Inter, and the forwards, they are the the unfortunate couple there, and it was kind of when the match started, and then we started playing, and there was this heavy rain from the start. I kind of liked how we played, and of course Zalewski scored this great goal, which kind of gave us more confidence and gave us this I don't know. Maybe it gave us a bit of relief kind of feeling, and I think we played the okayish first half. I think, of course, Torino is a physical team, so they put us in a bit of trouble with their kind of crosses and the aerial balls. But Martinez was on his place. He was managed to grab this one good chance or the one good header. But I think the first half was okay. Of course, the rain was a bit of at the end of first half. It was a bit unbearable, and they had to stop it, and then they played it through. I believe there wasn't like a big stop there, like maybe I don't know, 10 minutes maybe, and then the second half. Was it the second half when we got the penalty? I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. Second half, we got the penalty, and your boy converted it. Converted the penalty like a week ago as well.
Yep.
So that's 2 goals in a row now for Aslani, and I think Aslani wasn't bad. He was pretty okay yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know. How did you feel? How our guys like individually played? Do you have any kind of highlights or really bad performances?
No, I honestly I don't feel like anyone was really that bad. I feel like we played okay. Again, I think that there was such an emotional letdown going into this match, and I think there was very low expectations for whether this would even be consequential. I mean, it turned out to be very consequential, but I think one of the things going into the match that I was surprised to see with the heavy rotation was that we still looked pretty organized. Like, it didn't seem as disjointed, and I think the midfield did a good job. Aslani did a good job of pulling some of the strings, and then everybody else, seemed like they had, at least it looked like they'd all played together before. Like sometimes when you have too much substitutions, it looks like you're just like, have you guys even, you're not anticipating where players are going to be. Like, you're not executing basic tactics, and you're like, well, what's going on? But at least it looked like we were still a cohesive, organized unit. And then the Zalewski goal, I think, like you mentioned, was just an amazing goal, great goal. And he deserves it, certainly. And, I think that definitely helped give the rest of the team a lot of confidence. I think I saw our play improve a little bit after that goal. And then Torino, like you said, were very physical, and Martinez made a couple of really big saves. But overall, I think the team played just fine. The penalty was, well deserved. And we took it and we scored it. Honestly, I didn't think it was a great penalty taken by Aslani, to be honest. But I think he probably saw the goalie go the other way, so he didn't try too hard to place it, but it was way too central for my liking. But still, credit to him for stepping up and scoring it. And, it ended up being 2-0 at that point. And it seems like it given the amount of rain and given how, the environment was just kind of crumbling at that point, it seemed like it was going to be good enough. And then it was good enough. And, you win. It didn't feel particularly satisfying, I feel like, but it felt good to get the 3 points after such an emotional high. Cause I'm sure from a player's perspective, after coming off of that Barcelona match, you're like, you don't really know what to expect going into something that's a lot more routine and seemingly already cooked. And then you go and you win. And then what happened with Napoli happens with Napoli. And now all of a sudden it's extremely, extremely close.
Yeah. And there was Bastoni and Bisek who started against Barcelona. So there was 2 guys only on the starting lineup who played against or started against Barcelona. And I felt Augusto didn't have a good game against Torino. Maybe to highlight some of the not so good performances. I felt the left side, at least in the first half, Bastoni and Augusto, they both kind of missed their guys a bit there. There was situations when Torino players were able to get to the ball and they just kind of forgot or were too lazy, were too tired to get to the between the ball and the guy. But overall, pretty good match. And like I said, especially given that Taremi and Correa played the whole match, like they were kind of okay. We were able to. There were maybe a bit more space now in opponent's half than I think we've used to, at least in Serie A. So it kind of felt okay for these two guys to be there. It wasn't like super physical, because usually it's pretty physical up front for us, and these guys don't do well in these kind of those kind of environments. So yeah, it was a nice match. The result, okay, maybe Torino would have deserved a goal, but you get what you deserve usually in football anyway. So they didn't score a goal when they had the chances. They had the chances in the end, but couldn't score. So we won 2-0, and at the time when it ended, it was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
but then
exactly.
Right after, it was the Napoli-Genoa match, which ended up 2-2. So that kind of switches the whole situation almost like not upside down, but like now it's a different ball game now. I feel that like it's right there now. Because in my books, when there were 4 games left, so before last weekend's games, there were 4 games left. There were Lecce, Genoa, Parma, and Cagliari for Napoli. And Lecce and Parma are the away matches. My hope was that maybe they lose one, maybe they draw those. But when they won Lecce, I kind of lost my hope that, okay, this is it now. But now that they managed to lose points against Genoa at home, it kind of changes. It kind of changes now the situation for Napoli tremendously, because now they are in a big pressure. They need to win both their matches, because they can't be sure that we won't win. We have we are now chasing, and I feel that we don't have the same pressure as they do now, because now they need to win. They need to win. They need to go to Parma to this away match and take the 3 points with them, and that's not going to be easy. So, yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think I think it changes a lot. I mean, look, having to go someplace and absolutely win is very different than being okay with 1 point, and so being back in the title race, I don't think is an understatement for us. I mean, it's a draw can happen with anything. You could have a fluke, you could have a penalty, you can have, you could hit the post 6 times. Like anything can happen that ends up in a draw.
Like happened yesterday. For Napoli. They conceded pretty late for this random header, pretty far from goal, and they ended up conceding that kind of goals. Like anything can really happen, and now it's open. They had they had this one kind of card. You can draw one game, but now they used that card already, and they have 2 matches left. So I'm back to being like, well, I wouldn't say optimistic, but there's like a real hope now that something can happen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we still have harder matches, though. That's the problem.
Yeah. Maybe that's the issue, that we need to also beat Lazio and then Como.
Yeah.
Maybe Lazio is the tougher one. Okay, it's home, but Lazio has a lot to play. They have a lot to play still. So that's maybe a bit of an issue. But maybe Inter needs to focus on their games, obviously, and handle their end of the bargain. But
you're right. The situation is much, much better now. I mean, it's because like I said, Napoli could draw. Even the best team can end up drawing a bad team without too much issue. Like, but seeing them lose was going to be pretty far fetched, I think, especially their home matches. So I think we're right back into it. And unfortunately for our players, it means that, you can't empty out the bench probably for the next two matches the way you maybe would have done if, Napoli were to have this kind of confirmed at this point.
One silver lining is that we are not in the Coppa final, because it would have been in this week. So
oh gosh, yeah.
at least we can they can like train and rest for the whole week and concentrate on the Lazio match. But one detail from the Napoli match was after the final whistle, Napoli guys, the players, they were so disappointed. They were I think that there's a decent chance something will happen in the next two rounds. They might have lost the Scudetto right there, with kind of in their heads, in the mentality mindset. It might be the difference maker there, but let's see. It turned out to be kind of a interesting end of the kind of the Serie A season after all, since now it's all up there, and all these matches, what I've understood, they should be played at the same time, because there's the relegation battle going on, and that kind of affects these games as well, because Napoli plays Parma up, and Parma is in the relegation battle. There's Empoli, there's Venezia, there's Cagliari. So I hope they all these games are played at the same time, so there won't be any kind of the result of that match. So maybe Parma won't have the incentives to kind of fight that much against Napoli. So let's hope they all play at the same time to have this kind of the motivation to fight till the last second.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I hope that does happen. But yeah, like you said, unexpected, but we're still back into it, just 1 point out. So, it's going to be exciting even in the league to finish out the last couple of weeks. So for Inter fans, it's a great time to be alive. No complaints.
Yeah. Anything else, or should we just wrap it up here?
No, I think we can wrap it up, but we should just stress one more time about how Asllani has essentially secured 6 points for us in the last few weeks. So props to Asllani, and RIP to all the Asllani haters out there. And one last thing I guess we should mention is that if Jay were here, he would tell us that Napoli dropping points was essentially, a non-issue, because we were going to throw away our Scudetto hope by losing to Lazio anyway. So none of this ultimately matters.
Well, as for Napoli, I saw this rumor that we want to send Asllani out and replace with Ricci or Friendrup from Genoa. So yes or no? How would you respond?
Yeah, I would. I mean, Ricci definitely. I would take Ricci. The other guy, I don't know. I haven't been that. I don't know enough about him yet, because he hasn't outwardly impressed me. But that doesn't mean he isn't a good player. So, like I said before, yeah.
At least stats wise, Friendrup is he's like a defensive mastermind there in the midfield. But let's see what happens. All right, yeah. Let's wrap it up and Forza Inter, Forza Parma. And, catch you later.
Yep. Forza Inter.